So unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Bill Burr has been taking the criticisms that are being levied at him very well. In his most recent, or one of his most recent Monday morning podcast episodes, he addresses the controversy once more, and in a much worse way than he previously addressed it. I think this is the second time that he's addressed the criticisms. Now, what's interesting is that Burr seems to be mischaracterizing the criticisms that he's been receiving. In the previous video, I discussed this logical fallacy referred to as the Mott and Bailey logical fallacy. And so what people will ultimately do is, let's say you have someone who is trying to defend a certain position that's very difficult to defend, either because they know that they're wrong or because the likelihood of this argument being true or being effective is very low. Regardless, they're trying to defend this position against certain criticisms. But because it is so difficult to defend, what people will do is they'll replace this difficult to defend position with a much easier argument to defend. But anyways, we'll get back to that logical fallacy once we come across that part in the video. But for now, let's go ahead and start listening to what Bill Burr has to say.
It's not going so good in my neck of the woods. I'll tell you that. The sanctimonious is sanctimonian. Key word on the monian. Oh, Jesus. All right, here's the deal. You guys are asking me, obviously, a ton of questions about the absolute controversy, all right? Here's the deal. I have no problem answering any of them. The problem I have is after I answer them, it all gets clipped. And then once it gets clipped, then the lies start getting told, or they start shaping it and making it this and making it that. So all I'm doing is just throwing another log on the fire, and then they can make more money. No, I'm sorry. Well, no, because they care so much. That's right. Sorry, not because they're just making money.
I mean, it's patently ridiculous that he's criticizing the people who have shown ethical concerns with Burr going over to Saudi Arabia and performing for the government, saying that you guys are just talking about this because you're grifters, when he's literally the one who took blood money from one of the most oppressive regimes in the world. Because we can just as easily say that you don't actually care about anything good possibly coming out of this Riyadh Comedy Festival. You just care about the money. You went over there to take a fat wad of cash from the Saudi regime. So instead of just calling these people who are voicing their concerns over you going over and performing in Saudi Arabia grifters, instead of just calling them grifters, why don't you just address the actual arguments?
The level of like straight up lies is just, it's wild. So like these stories of like there was no women there, he just performed to the royals. By the time they're done with this, they're going to say I went over there and did a one-on-one show in a tent staring at my toes, and then I left for the head guy, whoever the hell it is over there, right? Once again, I performed in an arena over there. In the round, there was 8,000 people at the show. Okay? It was citizens. And then they had diplomats sitting down front in a nerve-wracking way for the performer to make sure that, you know, you didn't talk about the 2 or 3 things that they said that they negotiated down to not talk about. Once again, as I said before, whoever put together the comedy festival and everything, what it did for freedom of speech over there, because like before it started, you couldn't talk about all of this stuff, and then they whittled it down to just that. And that is how, you know, if you truly care about stuff like that, you gradually move towards something more positive.
All right, so it's pretty impressive here how he's managed to mischaracterize the criticisms that he's been receiving. So he did that Mott and Bailey logical fallacy, as I was saying earlier. So this is what he did. The issue is that he went over to Saudi Arabia and took the money from this oppressive country, right? First of all, the money that he is receiving, the money that he is making is coming straight from the Saudi crown. It is coming straight from the Saudi regime, the same regime that engages in some of the most parochial practices that we have seen in the world. With the exception of countries like North Korea, Eritrea, Turkmenistan, we're talking about the most censorial country in the world. We're talking about a country that still engages in some of the most parochial practices imaginable. We're talking about a country that still has public executions, that their journalists for voicing out against the crown, activists. We're talking about a country that still has male guardianship laws. We're not just talking about the citizens of this country going over and performing for the citizens. We're talking about going over there, taking the money from the government, performing for some diplomats that are there in front of you. And we're talking about assisting the political project of Saudi Arabia in what has been called sportswashing. So I talk about sports washing. I'm pretty sure I went over a little bit in the previous video, but I certainly went over it in depth in the first video where I addressed the Riyadh Comedy Festival, where Saudi Arabia is trying to diversify its income revenue streams. So right now it's largely dependent on oil, but oil's not going to be in existence for forever. We actually originally thought oil was going to dry up by like the 90s, and then we were certain that oil was going to dry up by the year 2000. But it turns out that the earth has so much oil that we don't know when the end date for the existence of oil will be, but we know that there is an end date, and Saudi Arabia sure as hell knows that there will be an end date. And so what they're doing is they're entering the entertainment business, where they're purchasing and financing some of the biggest teams in the world, some of the biggest sports teams. You saw this with Newcastle United, where the PIF, the Public Investment Fund, which is effectively a governmental branch of the Saudi Arabian regime, they're financing a team like Newcastle United, so that way the people, the supporters of Newcastle United are looking at Saudi Arabia and are thinking to themselves, dang, so yeah, this rich country just purchased our club, and they're buying some of the most expensive players, some of the best players out there in the world, and so our team is performing better because of that. Now our team might be in the top 5 in the Premier League table. Now they might go to the Champions League. Maybe they'll win. And so they're starting to develop a favorable view of Saudi Arabia, and often ignoring the atrocities that are going on in their country. Because one of the things that sports washing does is it gets people to have a more favorable view of Saudi Arabia or whatever country is participating in sports washing, and it makes them turn a blind eye towards all the atrocities that are going on in that country. Yeah, do they behead journalists? Do they behead people in public executions? Sure. Do they treat women in like this disgusting, archaic, parochial manner? Probably. But hey, Newcastle United just made it to the Champions League next year, so that's pretty cool. But they won't stop there. They'll also help finance some of the local politics. So for example, with Newcastle in particular, they'll help finance the infrastructure in Newcastle. And this gives them some leverage over the local politicians. So they're not just gaining favorability worldwide and getting people to turn a blind eye towards their atrocities, they're also gaining political leverage in other countries. And so when comedians go to Saudi Arabia on the dime of the Saudi regime, no, you're not just going over there and performing for the people. No, the issue isn't that there are no women in attendance necessarily. The issue is much grander than that. The issue is that you have become a political puppet of the Saudi regime, very similar to the criticisms that you had of these MAGA podcast comedian bros that are inviting JD Vance onto their podcast, inviting Donald Trump onto their podcast, and making them look nice and funny and relatable to people who aren't billionaires. And that's one of the reasons why I really admired Bill Burr, because he did go after this sycophantic group of American comedian podcasters that just inviting people running for the presidency onto their podcast, becoming political puppets, not asking them hard questions, not even doing basic research, and just agreeing and nodding along with everything that this guy sitting across from you who is in the Epstein files has to say. But Burr isn't addressing these criticisms. Instead, the criticisms that he's choosing to address are that I guess some people said that there were no women in attendance. I didn't know about this, and even if it were true, it wouldn't change any of my criticisms at all. Or that people are saying that he performed strictly for the government and the government only, that there were no civilians there. In my previous video, I explicitly stated that that he was also performing for civilians, so that wasn't a criticism that I had, and I personally didn't really see any criticisms being thrown at him that he was only performing for government officials. I haven't come across someone who has said that. But even if they did say that, he's still not addressing the overall arguments that are being made against him. And so what he's doing is that he's defending a position that is much easier to defend. He's defending that, saying like, look, there were women there, so that argument isn't good. There were civilians there, so the argument that I only performed for the government is wrong. And he's just exonerating himself of any accountability by doing this. It's a classic Mott and Bailey situation where he's replacing the argument that he really should be defending with something that's a lot easier to defend, saying like, look, there were women there. Look, there were civilians there. That's not what people are largely concerned about with here, Bill.
All of this sanctimonious shit out there, I'm going to tell you something right now. I saw, in 33 years of stand-up, I've never seen anybody with bigger balls. And I'm not going to say the name of the comedian, even though you're going to figure it out. But I'm just trying not to get anybody else this fucking shit coming at him. Went on over there, openly gay. And in the middle of the set, two of the diplomats got up to go to the bathroom. and this person said, "Hey, where are you going? Are you going to go on Grinder?" I mean, I've seen them all. I've never seen anybody. It's like I don't have the balls to say that. And the fact that her own people came at her and all of that, it's disgusting. It really is. That's what they're going to clip. That's what they're going to clip. Bill says fucking the reaction to da-da-da is just, I don't want to talk anymore about it. But like I said, like I would love to answer all of this stuff. I'm not afraid of any of these questions. I would love to answer them. You know, it's just that the way that it is being used. And my favorite thing, you know, I did a couple of sets last night, and I didn't run into any of the special ones when I was down there. But I'm really looking forward to that when I do. Because I know this is how this shit goes down, you know? Yada, yada, yada is said over here. And then when you run into the person face to face, this is what's always said. Hey, man. Hey, man. Hey, man. How's it going, man? Just checking in on you, man. Are you doing okay, man? That fucking bullshit. That phony-ass bullshit. But I'm not going to lie to you. You know, how do I put this? Do you know when you just sort of, no matter what the behavior is, but you just know a person, so you just expect it, so it doesn't bug you? That's kind of how it is. So I sort of expect that. And
now, with you going over to Saudi Arabia, taking the blood money and doubling down consistently without addressing any of the arguments, we kind of expect this grifter shill-like behavior now from you. And it's a shame, because you were the one person who was calling this behavior out when it was happening here in the United States. But when you effectively did the same thing, but on a much grander scale, you're trying to exonerate yourself from any level of accountability by not addressing the actual arguments. You're not actually addressing the real concerns that people are having. By all means, you can address these arguments that I guess some people are making, that there were no women there, that you only performed for the actual government. You can address that, go for it. But while you're at it, why don't you actually address the biggest issue that most people seem to be having with this? So that's pretty much it. But I also forgot to mention, earlier he had been talking about how this was a good thing for freedom of speech, because when they were first invited, there were a lot of stipulations about actually going over and performing. There were many rules about what you couldn't say. And after some pushback by some of these edgy comedians, they managed to whittle down the rules to just those things, like you can't criticize the country, you can't criticize the crown, stuff like that. And he's saying this as a good thing. But my concern, and it's the same concern that I expressed in the previous video, I said this, we already knew that those were the rules. As far as we were concerned, actually, those were the only rules. Those were the only stipulations that they gave you for going over to Saudi Arabia, performing, and taking however millions of dollars that he probably took from them. I don't know how much money specifically he made. But we already knew about those rules. In fact, those were the only rules that we were aware of because of the female comedian, whose name I cannot remember right now. But here it is on the screen, as well as those 3 rules that were in her contract. We already knew about that. We didn't know about these other rules that he said existed. And so him saying that it's actually a good thing because we managed to we managed to bring down the number of rules just to those 3. Those rules were the only ones that we were aware of. Those rules were enough already for us to be concerned about this, for us to complain about this. And so him framing it as if, oh, it was actually worse, but now it's this, so therefore it's a good thing, is completely it's unjustifiable. It's disingenuous. No. That's not the correct framing that you should be using to address the scenario. The correct framing is, here are the rules that you had to abide by. They were actually even worse rules, but these rules are still really bad. So anyways, yeah, that's Bill Burr's most recent attempt to address the criticisms, but he didn't actually really address any of the criticisms. Instead, he chose to he's complaining about other people lying about it, when in reality, either he's lying about it, or he hasn't taken the time to actually sit down and read through some of the concerns that people are expressing, to read through what exactly Saudi Arabia is doing. Either he's lying, or he's being lazy about it, or I don't know, maybe the stress is just getting to him and he just kind of wants to avoid this as much as possible. And maybe in the future, once he's not so stressed about the situation, maybe that's when he'll have a change of heart, or at least legitimately address what's going on and try to give I hate to sound like an enlightened centrist right now, but try to give a nuanced take of the situation. But maybe I'm just taking copium.